Today, we're going to introduce a very powerful node in LTX 2.3 called LTX Director. The most special thing about it is that one single node almost integrates all the core ways of using LTX 2.3. As we explained before with prompt relay, its core idea is to assign different prompts to different video segments. But LTX Director goes one step further. It turns this kind of prompt-based time routing into a more intuitive timeline node. You can do image to video, you can do text to video, you can use a starting reference, you can use an ending reference, and you can even place multiple middle frames so the video develops according to the rhythm you designed. But there is one problem. The official workflow does run, but the results are not ideal. So in this video, I'm going to do two things. First, I'll explain clearly what LTX Director actually is and how it relates to prompt relay. Second, I'll make an improved version of the official workflow. After the improvements, using the same prompt and reference image, the generated result will be better than the official workflow. We'll also test several typical use cases and some useful tricks. For example, after we switch the model to an uncensored model, the motion performance becomes much bolder. What you're seeing now is the GitHub page for LTX Director. It comes from What Prompt relay is more like a technical idea. What it solves is the correspondence between text and time segments. LTX Director is more like turning that idea into an operable director's console. Installation is actually very simple. You can directly search for What ComfyUI in ComfyUI Manager and install it from there. If Manager does not have the latest version yet, you can go directly into the custom nodes folder of ComfyUI and clone this repository manually. After installation, just restart ComfyUI. This node depends on two extensions. The first one is ComfyUI LTX Video, which is the official ComfyUI extension developed by the LTX team. The other one is KJ nodes, which I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with. For easier demonstration, I also built the workflow on Running Hub. In the ComfyUI space, Running Hub is a really great online workflow platform because whenever new models or new extensions appear, it usually follows up very quickly. Running Hub also provides an online community platform for ComfyUI creators, where you can find a lot of creative inspiration and example workflows. You can choose between two workflows here. The first one is the official workflow. The second one is the improved workflow I made for you. These two workflows are slightly different. The core differences are in two places. The first is how the main model is loaded, and the second is the Sigma setting. Let's first look at the official workflow. Its overall structure can be divided into four parts. The main model loading, the LTX Director timeline node, the first stage sampling, and the second stage upscaling sampling. This is actually the same two-stage sampling process we talked about before for LTX 2.3. First, generate a base video at a lower resolution, and then upscale it through the latent upscaler. In the model loading section, the official workflow uses the main model provided by the official ComfyUI package. Pay attention here. This is a checkpoint. So we need to load a distilled LoRa. After using this LoRa, we can usually sample with 8 steps. This LoRa also has different choices, and right now I've set its weight to 0.5. The encoder settings are no different from what we used before, including the VAE. Next, let's look at the most important node, called LTX Director. There are several very important parameters inside this node. The first one is called the global prompt. It is used to describe the stable information throughout the entire video, such as who the character is, what the overall style is, and what the scene is. The second one is called timeline data, which is the timeline data we talk about. It stores each segment in the timeline, including its starting position, segment length, prompt, whether that segment has a reference image, and also audio. The third one is local prompts. The fourth one is segment length, which means the length of each segment. Some people may ask, why can't I see the global prompt? Pay attention here. Inside this node, there is a configuration button. After you click it, you'll see some basic settings for the node, such as whether it uses time or frame count, and also whether the global prompt is displayed. Let me first give you the simplest image to video example. We set the entire video to 121 frames, which is 5 seconds. Then we only use one local prompt. A beautiful girl is waving her hand. At this point, LTX Director is very simple. It is basically integrating the reference image, the prompt, and the timeline together. You can think of it as a basic image to video setup. Now let's look at the LTX Director Guide node. This node is very important because LTX Director only outputs our sampling conditions and guide data. But if this guidance information is going to actually affect the sampling process, we need a special node. That node is what we call LTX Director Guide. In the official workflow, two guide nodes are used. Pay attention to their scale by values because the scaling factors are different. Since we are using two-stage sampling, the first stage generates the base video, and the second stage performs a 2x upscale. So in the first stage, we scale it down to 0.5 of the original size, which means half size. In the second stage, we scale it up by 2 times, so it matches the resolution we set. The sampling parameters are fairly simple. In the official workflow, it uses the Euler sampler, and the basic scheduler uses linear quadratic. The step count is 8, and CFG is 1. In the second stage, the scheduler is still linear quadratic. The step count becomes 4, and denoise is no longer 1. It becomes 0.42. The main thing you need to pay attention to in this workflow is that the sampling parameters are slightly different. Another very important point is that the denoise value in the upscaling stage is not 1, but 0.42. Next, let's look at my improved workflow. First is the main model loading. I did not use that checkpoint model. I used unitloader instead. If we use this model, it already has distillation built in, so I don't need to add the acceleration LoRa. The second difference is the sigmas in the second stage. The official workflow uses basic scheduler, while in my improved version, I changed the second stage to ManualSigmas. You don't need to memorize this, just copy it directly. And in the upscaling stage, I also use ManualSigmas. Pay attention here. My denoise value is now 1, which is also different from the official 0.42. Now let's compare the results. We'll use the same prompt, the one we just saw. The girl is waving her hand. Let's look at the hand waving motion. Both workflows can complete it, but pay attention here. The improved version has more comfortable overall movement and image quality. The motion range is larger, and it does not look as stiff or rigid. This is why I made an improved version of the workflow for you. To fully understand the features and capabilities of LTX Director, we did a lot of testing. So next, let's move into the actual test section. Just now, we demonstrated the most basic use case, which is image to video. In other words, we place the image and prompt at the beginning of the timeline. The workflow I just explained is also this one. You can upload a character reference image, then write a local prompt. Just like before, we wrote a beautiful woman is waving her hand, and the whole video generates a hand waving motion around that image. Next, let's increase the difficulty. We'll use LTX Director to achieve the effect of prompt relay. Here we use a global prompt. In general, the global prompt is used to describe the character's appearance and the overall environment. Here I wrote a happy Asian girl bun hairstyle, purple ribbon. For the local prompts, we have 3 segments. The first one is that she places her hand beside her face and winks at the camera. The second one is that she places both hands beside her cheeks and makes a cat paw gesture. The third one is that she blows a kiss toward the camera. The time allocation here is very important. You need to decide how many frames you give each action. Our entire video is 169 frames, which is 7 seconds. Since we are using the logic of prompt relay, the frame counts assigned to the 3 segments are 48 frames, 60 frames, and 61 frames. Now, let's look at the result. You'll notice that compared with a normal long prompt, this method makes it easier to express continuous actions, especially the first 2 actions. The wink and the hand gesture can both correspond clearly to the prompts. The third action, the blowing kiss motion, is more conservative on the original LTX 2.3 model. If you want a more expressive result, you can use sulfur, which we talked about before. This is an uncensored model. The prompt is very similar to what we just used, but pay attention here. The blowing kiss action is much bolder. It even feels a little like she is licking her own hand. Her overall expression, body movement, and interaction with the camera are all more open and expressive. The fourth use case is starting with prompts only without a reference image, and then using a reference image at the end. Here we do not use a global prompt. We have 2 local prompts. For the first segment, I simply wrote a woman waving. For the second one, I wrote that she blows a kiss toward the camera with one hand. The frame counts are also assigned here. For the first action, we give it 85 frames, and for the second one, we give it 83 frames. What kind of scenario is this suitable for? This is basically what we call an end frame workflow. If you already know what the ending of the video should look like, you can use this method. For example, maybe you want the character to finally turn into a certain pose, or you want the camera to end close to a specific expression. The fifth use case is multi-frame reference, and this is also the easiest place for things to go wrong. In this workflow, we use 3 reference images. The global prompt is that a girl is riding a bicycle. The timeline allocation for the 3 segments is 60 frames, and 48 frames. For each local prompt, I wrote dynamic motion, best quality. The result is not especially good. The reason is simple. Multi-frame reference gives the model a lot of visual constraints. If the differences between these reference images are large, the model has to handle character consistency, pose changes, scene changes, and motion transitions at the same time. For the LTX 2.3 model, that is a bit too much pressure, so multi-frame reference is not always better just because you use more frames. Once you go beyond 3 reference images, the video can actually become more unstable. For example, I don't like this kind of scene switching effect. I still want the result to feel like one continuous shot. In that case, you can add a LoRa. We also talked about this LoRa before, using the same 3 reference images. After I add this LoRa, you'll notice the result becomes more like a one-shot video. Of course, this kind of transition may still have some unnatural parts. Here are some practical suggestions. If you only want to control the sequence of actions, prioritize text-based segmentation. In other words, use LTX Director plus prompt relay. If you want to control the starting and ending images, use this start frame and end frame method. If you want to use more than 3 reference frames, you should lower your expectations a bit, and it is better to combine it with a transition LoRa to make the model more capable. To summarize, LTX Director is a ComfyUI extension that is very worth studying. Its biggest value is that it brings almost all the LTX workflows we can think of into one single node. But you also need to pay attention to several limitations. First, it is not a model. It is a special node. Second, the official workflow has some limitations. So I recommend using my improved version of the workflow as much as possible. Also, when using multiple prompt segments, don't put too many actions into each local prompt, and don't make each prompt too long. If those actions do not have enough time, the model will not be able to show them properly. That's it for LTX Director, so what are you waiting for? Go try it yourself, follow me, and become someone who truly understands AI.